Good evening. It is I, the Bleach Demon. Welcome, and thought we'd dive into a little bit of something that has flummoxed me a bit on this pre-Christmas Eve, and it's something we kind of have fallen into the rhetoric and use of the left in the waves of feminism. And I've given it a little bit of thought, and I'm going to say the whole idea of waves is complete and utter fabrication. It's because it's easy to categorize the movements and whatnot. And I just gotta say, I'm not impressed with the whole idea of these waves. So, we'll touch on this a little bit. So, the first wave of feminism is roughly from 1848 to 1930, according to this lovely little chart. And apparently, because of the Great Depression, there is no feminism during the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and up until 1960s, which I think we all know is a load of Biden. And then you get second wave feminism with the dirty hippies going into the 90s with Bill Clinton not knowing what the definition of is. And then third wave into the modern era, at least current year. But, let's kind of take a look at the current definitions. Again, another handy-dandy chart with a little hyperbole at the end, but why the hell not? So, first wave, they consider suffrage instead of just suffering. So 19th to early 20th century mainly focused on suffrage alongside legal rights, mostly active in the UK, Canada, and the United States. A movement succeeded in gaining women the right to vote and other legal liberties. Well, what they also failed to mention there is Imperial Germany was one of the first major nations to give women the right to vote. So, this chart just automatically goes out the window because this is only for the Anglosphere and the normies. So then you get second wave, which is about equal pay. Began in the US and spread to Europe, Asia. Focused mainly on sexuality, reproductive rights, and the wage gap. Cough, cough. Movement succeeded in securing career opportunities for many women and many reproductive rights. Yeah, that's a lot of this was born out of a tolerance for socialism, specifically Soviet communism, that was becoming more and more active in the 1960s and onward. And you also have to remember that this was the era where you had the head of the National Organization of Women, as Gloria Steinem, I believe, who said, all sex, even within the institution of marriage, is rape. Yeah, that's such a moderate second wave. Then you have the third wave feminism, who are fighting the patriarchy. Yeah. Fights for equality, focusing on exclusively female victims of gender-neutral issues, mostly on Tumblr, Facebook, upper middle class. Again, this is a meme. Rejects labeling by adopting labels and identities. Everything's the patriarchy's fault. Blah, blah, blah. And then you get the fun meme of going too far and going full ISIS, but that it again goes to what we consider waves of feminism. So, this is from Harper's Weekly, 1859, one of the follow-ons to the famous Seneca Conference of 1848. I'm going to be emphasizing 1848 a lot, and you'll understand why here after a while. But yeah, so we have this nice kind of bucolic antebellum world where, yeah, women are sticking their noses up in the air against the hooting and hollering of angry men in the audience. Well, the balcony, and of course you have the whipped men down below. Of course, yeah, first wave feminism's always kind of painted in the veneer of the suffragettes and that sort of mindset. And again, I'm just not convinced when we get to the Declaration of Sentiments from the 1848 Seneca Conference that isn't basically third wave feminism just evolved. So then you get second wave feminism. Nice dirty hippies, probably not a bathed body among any of these individuals. Ah, yes, women of the world unite. Nice reference to workers of the world unite. And then we get into the pussy hat wearing psychopaths of third wave feminism who want nothing better to do than to scream aloud and, well, basically become irritants. You thought pepper spray in the face was bad. Wait till you get near this crowd. And lots of nostril shots in this. But to end the kind of introductory eye assault, yeah, this is kind of the penultimate third to fourth wave feminist. Yeah, I'm done with boys. I'm looking for a real man. My age says 38, but I'm actually 35, lol. I'm not here for a hookup, so swipe left if that's your thing. I'm a medical assistant who's 420 friendly, have 3 kids who come first that are my world. So if that's a problem, you know what to do. I'm also 5'8", and I like to wear heels, lol, so you have to be at least 6'3". Please message me first and say more than hey. Yeah, that's third wave feminism in a nutshell. That's all feminism in a nutshell. Mostly nuts. But, so I really want to dispel this idea of waves. And this is kind of a copy of one of the, I think it said 1908. You know, like, hey, these were the individuals who were here in 1848 for the Declaration of Sentiments. And I will tell you, it is a wild ride. But to give you a preview of some of the individuals who were here, we have Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, let's see, Angelina Grimke, her sister Sarah Grimke. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. And before I read to you the wonderful Declaration of Sentiments, which I am loath to do, but I think it's important for my conclusions. However, to talk about the Titanic, suffragettes deny chivalry on Titanic. Women first is the universal rule, says Sylvia Pankhurst. This is no exception. Sacrifice scoffed at. Another woman said, though saved through the noble sacrifice of men, women were equally hard situated, having to see the ship go down. Yes, men stayed on board to die in a cold, chilly death, women most affected. So, I'm sure you're sitting on pins and needles now. And I will beg your forgiveness for a bit of a long-winded piece, but I will read a little introductory paragraph, and then we'll get directly into the Declaration of Sentiments. In 1848, a historic assembly of women gathered in Seneca Falls, New York, home of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Stanton organized Seneca Falls Convention with Lucretia Mott, who, like her, had been excluded from the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London 8 years earlier. Modeling her declaration closely to the Declaration of Independence, Stanton extended it to a list of grievances of women. The Declaration also called for the right for women to vote, radical demand that helped launch women's suffrage movement, leading ultimately to the recognition of women's voting rights with the 19th Amendment in 1920. And this was an introduction from Voices of a People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn and Arnov, who are both known socialist scholars who shaped a lot of American history textbooks in the mid to late 20th century. So basically from the 1970s through the death of Zinn in, I believe it was 2010, he had a lot of influence on American history textbooks. So that gives you a brief example of his glowing impartiality. So, the Declaration of Sentiments. Well, let's dive right into it. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one portion of the family of man to assume among the people of earth a position different from that which they have hitherto occupied, but none which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect of the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare causes that impel them to such course. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these rights, it is the right of those who suffer it to refuse allegiance to it and insist upon the institution of a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses, usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them to under absolute despotism, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for the safety and future security. Such has been the patient suffrage of the women under this government, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to demand equal station to which they are entitled. The history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries and usurpation on the part of man towards woman, having in direct object to the establishment of absolute tyranny over her. To provide this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world. He has not ever permitted her to exercise her inalienable right to the elective franchise. He has compelled her to submit to laws in the formation which she has no voice. He has withheld her from rights which are given to most ignorant and degraded men, both native and foreigners. Having deprived her of her own first right as a citizen, the elective franchise, thereby leaving her without representations in the halls of legislation. He has oppressed her on all sides. He has made her, if married, in the eye of the law, civilly dead. He has taken from her all right in property, even to wages she earns. He has made her morally an irresponsible being, as she can commit many crimes with impunity, provided they be done in the presence of her human husband. Pardon me. In the covenant of marriage, she is compelled to promise obedience to her husband, he becoming, to all intents and purposes, her master, the law giving him power to deprive her of her liberty and administer chastisement. He has also framed laws of divorce, so what shall be the proper causes of divorce in case of separation, to whom guardianship of the children shall be given, as to wholly regardless of the happiness of the woman, the law in all cases going upon the false supposition of the supremacy of a man and giving him all the power into his hands. After depriving her of all rights as a married woman, if single and the owner of property, he has taxed her to support a government which recognizes her only when her property can be made profitable to it. He has monopolized nearly all the profitable employments, and from those she is permitted to follow, she receives but a scanty remuneration. He closes against her all avenues of wealth and distinction, which he has considered most honorable to himself. As teacher of theology, medicine, or law, she is not known. He has denied her the facilities for obtaining a thorough education, all colleges being closed against her. He allows her in church as well as state, but a subordinate position, claiming religious authority over her exclusion from the ministry, and, with some exceptions, from any public participation in the affairs of the church. He has created a false public sentiment by giving to a world a different code of morals for men and women, by which moral delinquencies which exclude women from society are not only tolerated, but deemed of little account in man. He has usurped the prerogative of Jehovah himself, claiming that it is his right to assign her a sphere of action, when that belongs to her conscience and her God. He has endeavored in every way he could destroy her confident in her own powers, to lessen her self-respect and make her willing to lead a dependent and abject life. Now, in the view of this entire disenfranchisement, one half of the people of this country, their social and religious degradation, in the view of unjust laws above mentioned, and because women do feel themselves aggrieved, oppressed, and fraudulently deprived of their most sacred rights, we insist that they have the immediate admission to all the rights and privileges which belong to them as citizens of the United States. In entering upon the great work before us, we anticipate no small amount of misconception, misrepresentation, and ridicule, but we shall use every instrumentality within our power to effect our object. We shall employ agents, circulate tracts, petition the state and national legislatures, and endeavor to enlist the pulpit and the press on our behalf. We hope that this convention will follow by a series of conventions embracing every part of the country. Well, that was one hell of a mouthful. But I would doubt any of you are going to sit there and argue that that was only for first wave feminism. It's very blatantly clear that the entire point of this women's rights convention at Seneca Falls, New York, 1848, is basically just the entire feminist movement to this day. The only things that have changed are not the goals. They are not really any of the tactics. It's just the society in which we see these things operate. And I would be very willing to say that all of this has always been about female supremacy. And it's one of those, yes, you can point to the laws of the time and address things that way, but are we really seeing anything in that thread, in that entire declaration of sentiments that I read, that sounds any different from what you're hearing out in the streets now? I'd say no. I would absolutely say no. And I think it behooves us to address it as such, because the moment we start, going down that road of, oh, well, there's different ways of feminism. Oh, well, they're all different. It's not that their goals were different. It's their tactics. There's difference in rhetoric. There's a difference in how they conduct themselves publicly. But there's no difference. And ultimately, I would say that the only way to quash these radical ideas is basically saying, hey, look, why don't you just be honest and say you're female supremacists? That's it. That's what they want. That's undeniably what they want. And they've just found very cozy ways to couch everything. So yeah, it's upon us to say, no, there is only one wave of feminism. It's a tsunami. And tsunamis are devastating. Now, I will also end on my little 1848. So, the Seneca Falls Conference happened, I believe it was either May or June of 1848. Amusingly, the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Engels was published February 1848. You had a series of revolutions in Europe in 1848. Me personally, while I won't necessarily say there's a connection directly between the publication of the Communist Manifesto and the whole Seneca Conference or Seneca Falls Convention, but it was a definite kind of mentality happening in the whole Western world that culminated a lot in 1848. So, I think we can pretty comfortably say, in conclusion, there have been no waves. The social movements out of which feminism has sprung has really always had the same goals, and that there's really, really no way around the fact that feminism is just communism with tits. So, on that note, I will bid you all a good evening, good night, good morning. Not even sure anymore. Have a good one all, and I will catch you in the next one. Yeah, there you go.